Hey, what's up my friends? How's it going? It's Shamrocked here with a dungeon playthrough for you. This time we are doing a Halls of Infusion on a 22 with Fortified, Entangling, and Bolstering as the affixes for the week. This dungeon is a tough one, especially on Fortified, but it's very doable with the right talents and abilities, as well as a good amount of preparedness for the different sections. Hopefully this video can help walk you through how we handled some of the more difficult pain points in this dungeon, as well as show you how I personally deal with all of the mechanics and fights this dungeon has to offer. Before getting into the guide, let's take a quick look at the talent selection I went with for this run. On the left class talent tree, there are a few important ones to point out that deviate from my standard builds. I have found that with this rotation of Season 2 dungeons, my talents vary from dungeon to dungeon more than they did in Season 1. I've also found I am exploring with more utility for Fortified weeks, as the Fortified trash in Season 2, in my opinion, can be a bit trickier than what we saw in Season 1, and our utility can really help with that. First, due to Entangling being one of the affixes, we have spec'd into Thunderous Paws. This makes it so that going into Ghost Wolf will drop any snares and movement impairing effects on you, meaning you can instantly get out of Entangling without having to actually run away, which is useful if you get Entangling while trying to handle a different mechanic that favors you not moving. That being said, you still do have to sit through the Ghost Wolf global, so it's not necessary to deal with Entangling by any means, but it does help. Additionally, the AoE chill ability that the Ice Dragons in Halls of Infusion do can actually be eliminated with Thunderous Paws as well, allowing you to immediately dispel someone else as well as yourself if you do not have a Shadow Priest to mass dispel. Although, note that we did have a Shadow Priest in this run, so it was not necessary to use in that way. Moving down, I have Guardian's Cudgel also talented, as the trash in the first section of the dungeon can be especially painful with some channels that can only be stopped by hard stuns, meaning Thundershock does not work. Guardian's Cudgel, as you will see in the video, provides some extra relief during key moments throughout the dungeon. Other than that, I have also spec'd into Totemic Focus, mostly for the extended duration on Earthbind Totem, since Bolstering is one of the affixes and the tank will need to kite if the stacks get too high. It is also nice for the extended Cloudburst duration as well. Finally, the last ability I will point out is Thunderstorm with the extra talent point into Thundershock for the knock-up ability, which if you have watched any of my other videos, I say it all the time, this is one of the best crowd control abilities in the game for Mythic Plus and has a very generous cooldown. Moving over to the right side of the tree, this is the general build I've been running for most of the season, but with a few tweaks made in order to maximize my damage talents, given it is a Fortified week and not Tyrannical. Specifically, I am only running 1 point in Ancestral Vigor, which frees up a talent point for Stormkeeper, and I am also not running Wavespeaker's Blessing in order to get Lava Surge. Once again, these are choices that I have made with Fortified in mind, and knowing that I am not in keys high enough yet where the extra 5% HP given by 2 points in Ancestral Vigor over 1 is going to save anyone from being one-shot. One more quick stat and gear overview, I was item level 431 while running this key, and my secondary stat weights were 26% in Critical Strike, 11% in Haste, 48% in Mastery, and 12% in Verse. Ideally, I would have a little bit more Verse and maybe a little bit less Mastery or Crit, but these stat weights were definitely fine for getting through this key. Also note the embellishments I have were the Venom Stompers and the Spore Cloak, which you'll see come into play throughout the video as well. Alright, here we go, we're about to start this. So there's different ways that tank do this. I found it kind of just depends on the group comp and what they want to do with their route. So we decided to pull this entire first room and then lust it. And yeah, we were able to get through this pretty cleanly, I believe. So what you really need to watch out for these trash packs, and this is basically for the entire first section, you have the containment spheres that I believe they cast something called Expunge that you can interrupt. And if that goes off, you're wiped, like it's going to kill everybody. So you need to make sure you have at least one person watching for those interrupts. The containment beam they do is a really powerful ability that they channel. One being channeled on someone is not the biggest deal in the world, but if like 2 or 3 of them target the same person, they are most likely going to die if you don't have some sort of cooldown or something, so just be aware of that. And then the other mobs to be careful of in here are the Defenders. They do 2 things. They do a demoralizing shout that needs to be interrupted. If not, it basically slows down your entire party with like a haste debuff. And they also do something called Spear Flurry, which is sort of like a frontal cleave, and it puts a really nasty dot on you. and that dot does stack if you get hit multiple times. So just make sure that you and your group are staying away from those guys, especially when they cast the Spear Flurry. A couple of things to note: the Spear Flurry can be interrupted with Thundershock as well as Cap Totem, so you feel free to use it there. And then for the Containment Spheres, the beam that they do, Thundershock will not actually interrupt that, so which is really unfortunate. It would be like amazing if it did, but Cap Totem does. So that's one of the reasons why I spec into Guardian's Cudgel for this dungeon, is because you can interrupt those things just a little bit more. So if you have a coordinated group, that can definitely help out with that. Just be careful though when running Cudgel. In fact, you should kind of let your group know that it is going to be a double stun, so that you prevent the amount of stun immuning that you can potentially do to these mobs. So you'll notice for this first section, the trash gets increasingly harder as you get towards the first boss, because you get more containment spheres and more of the defenders. The other mob in here, I forget what they're called, but really the only thing you have to worry about is a jump that they do. It's like a slam. So every so often you'll see a brown sort of swirly on the ground. There, actually, you can see it right there. So if you stand in that, you're probably going to get one shot by it, especially like on anything higher than a 20 on Fortified. So just be careful of that, especially if they get bolstered. You really don't stand a chance. And you surprisingly have not a lot of time to get out of it. You have more time than like the Avalanche casts in Neltharian's Lair, but it's a pretty quick ability. So just make sure you get out of it as fast as you can. So 2 routes to go here. You can either go right out of the first room, and that is the way you go if you are planning to do the skip in case you wipe. However, the higher the key you get, that skip becomes more and more useless, because you're really not going to time the key even after one wipe. Even like on a 22, I don't really think you have time for one wipe, unfortunately. So really going to just get the skip is kind of redundant. It's actually probably smarter to go by here if you have an engineer, because they can actually interact with this orb and give everybody a free cheat death. And I believe it lasts like an hour, so you'll have it for the whole dungeon, which is pretty great, because there are a few points in here where things can go unexpected, or you might fall behind on something, and it's just nice to have a cheat death for everybody. So we do actually activate this. If you don't have an engineer, that's not really an option for you, but it's no big deal. It's once again, it's a nice to have. But if you're a great healer and your group is doing what they need to do, and you have a great tank, you shouldn't really worry about needing a cheat death. All right, so this is one of the harder packs. This pack and the pack right after can be really difficult, just because of the amount of containment beams, as well as if people stand in that Spear Flurry and really get hit by that. So I don't know if you've been noticing, but I'm using my cooldowns pretty liberally here, like Healing Tide, Slink, as well as Ancestral Guidance. I pretty much have at least one per pack. I'm also using Nature Swiftness as well pretty often. And that's because you really don't want to fall behind. The way the first boss works, you'll have likely everything back up by the time you need it for certain abilities. So really just go all out. It's better than having people die here for any of these packs, because either you have to waste time rezzing or they have to waste time running back, and it's not ideal. So the better option is to just use your cooldowns, don't sit on them. And I would give that advice for pretty much any Fortified key. If you're doing trash and you're not using your cooldowns, you have a higher chance of people dying, especially if the trash gets bolstered or just is not very nice in general. And B, if you're doing more manual healing, without your cooldowns, then you're probably doing less damage as well. So using your healing cooldowns is a great way to sort of let your cooldowns do their thing while you kind of sit there and DPS. Obviously, that's not including Ascendance, because you need to heal with that, but Slink, Healing Tide, and Ancestral Guidance are all healing cooldowns that allow you to get some DPS in. So you'll notice we actually just pulled another pack there before going into this room, and the reason we did that is because we are skipping 2 of the dragons in the last hallway before the third boss, which you'll see when we get there. So getting this extra trash percentage allows us to skip those and not have to worry about being under count. So this is another group that is really tough, especially if these containment spheres target the same person, in which case I would say use Slink. This is a great pack to have Slink for. If you're lucky, they won't target the same person, or you'll have a stun for it that you can sort of that you can sort of use to mitigate that. So you'll see here, I actually used Slink because the tank ended up getting 2 or 3 stacks of the Spear Flurry. And not only that, I think they were bolstered as well. So the tank was dropping pretty quick there. So Slink was the perfect solution for that. But that being said, once again, I had actually saved Slink for that moment because I had planned to use it with the containment spheres. I just ended up not having to because we had some pretty good stuns and I got lucky with who they were targeting. But I did use the Slink to save the tank, once again, because I don't need that Slink to the beginning of this fight. This going into this first boss, it can be quite mana intensive, so just make sure that you let your tank know if you need a drink, like I just did there. And then we go right into this boss. So this guy can be annoying. It's actually one of the really hard bosses on Tyrannical in my opinion. So the Static Surge is pretty tough. It does some massive AoE damage and it does, I believe it's 4 ticks. So you really need to at least get a couple of heals on everybody in between those ticks or it will kill somebody. And even though this is fortified, it is a 22, so it is pretty painful. So just make sure you're using your chain heals and your primordial waves for those moments as you can. Other than that, getting the overwhelming power dot, if you have a Shatter Priest, it's great because you can all run in the same direction and they will dispel everybody at once and then you can all run away. If not, it's okay. You basically just need to try and put a hot on everybody like a Riptide and then use whatever you can to increase your movement so that you can get out of the way and focus on healing everybody else. It's also a great moment to use personal defensives like Astral Shift, Spirit Walker's Grace, anything like that that can help, Health Pot, Lock Rock, whatever you can there, just to help you keep yourself alive so you can focus on other people. Having the Spore Cloak as well, the embellishment that gives you a shield after going under 30% health, can really help with the damage patterns in this fight as well. All of that being said, you do want to save the majority of your cooldowns for the second phase if you can. Not the intermission, but like after the intermission, the phase 2, just because the damage does increase quite a bit. Okay, for this intermission, you want to dispel anybody who gets 2 or more stacks of the debuff that these little balls go out. Note that they can be stunned, so you can put Cap Totem down. This is another great situation where Cudgel works in your favor. And other than that, you just want to get some more DPS in. If you're running Stormkeeper, this is a great spot to use it, because the faster these orbs die, the less damage the boss is going to do in phase 2. All right, and now moving into phase 2, this is where things start to get a little bit trickier, especially if he's gotten, several stacks. So just keep that in mind. The more stacks he has, the more damage he's going to do. So for Static Surge, there's not really anything going on, so I try not to use any cooldowns for that. But pretty much every ability after this, I pop some cooldown. So I did use Healing Tide there to help catch up with the Static Surge and going into this overwhelming power. Healing Tide is great because it will heal as you run away from whatever abilities you need to run away from. Specifically this giant cloud of lightning that's on the ground. It's a bit tricky though, so after the first overwhelming power, he will go directly into a Static Surge, and it basically happens given how big the pools are, by the time you run out. So that's another spot where you probably want to use a cooldown. I happen to pop Ascendance there, and then I just use my High Tide chain heals to the best of my ability. All right, for next overwhelming power, I actually have Slink here. Yeah, so I use that towards where we were running to. So anybody who needs a quick top off can run in there, and that basically just helped get everybody up high enough so that nobody got killed by this Static Surge. And had that fight gone on a little bit longer, I would have had Ancestral Guidance up again to use for any further mechanics, but thankfully we killed it, so that was great. That's definitely a fight, by the way. I've noticed, I've done it a few times now. The boss will be at 2 or 1%, and you'll think it's almost over, but it's not, because remember, this boss actually starts at 30% health. So, don't think it's over. Don't think you're out of the clear. You really need to heal up until that last 0% when the boss dies. Otherwise, you could catch you off guard and kill somebody at the end there. Okay, moving into the next section, you can either go straight or go left. I find going left is easier because there's less frogs to deal with, and the frogs are really annoying, especially on a higher fortified key. Also, I believe there's more count if you go left. I could be wrong there, but I believe it is more count, which is good for us skipping the dragon, even though it takes a little bit longer. So in my experience, going left is the way to go. However, you will sometimes get tanks who want to go straight, which is totally fine. It just is a little bit hard if you get the frogs on you. Also, you'll notice I did not take Poison Cleansing Totem. This is a great dungeon for it, especially on Tyrannical with the frog boss, where his minion frogs do more damage and take longer to kill. However, I find if you have any other cleanses in the group, like a paladin, usually that's enough. Also, if you have other stops like capacitor totem, wind rush, and earthbind, it basically just helps people run away from the frogs. And realistically, the poison really only becomes concerning if they get close to 10 stacks, because obviously it one-shots you and it starts to do a little bit more damage. But personally, given that this season there's so much utility to be had, I would rather not waste the talent point in there if I don't have to. So that's why I don't run poison cleansing for this on a high fortified key. Once again, if the composition had been a little bit different, I probably would have considered it a little bit more. But we had a pally who could do it for us for any time it was actually needed, so we were fine. Okay, going through this trash, sorry, I should be talking about the trash a bit more. The zealots are hidden, so don't do what I did and walk ahead. Make sure your tank goes first so that they end up getting hit by it, because it will stun them. They actually do a ton of damage as well, so just be ready for that. Your tank will get trucked by them. And then usually they're pulled with the packs of dragonflies, which only need to be interrupted, or with the frogs, which you need to kite. So, do whatever you need to do to get away from these frogs, because if they do sit there and wail on you, it's going to hurt big time. Okay, you'll see these frogs have it out for me. It's a little bit hard to stay alive. The pally helped me out there, but also it's basically just running and using what you need to. You'll notice I actually use Spirit Walker's Grace during that pull as well, so that I could heal while I was running away from those frogs. Okay, this pack we lust. These elemental dudes, the shock troopers, are kind of nasty. If they get one of their casts off, it can basically wipe your group. It like powers up their chain lightning ability, so make sure you're interrupting those. And then I can't really confirm this, but I found if you at least what it looks like, if you spread out a bit, it helps, because whatever they cast doesn't hit everybody. I'm not sure if that's only the case if they get their interruptible cast off, or if it just happens naturally. But just to be safe, I usually spread out here. Any stops that you have for these guys is great, because they do a lot of damage. And then Lust just helped us kill them a lot quicker. Okay, going into this mini boss, we have the fire dude and the wind dude. Given it's a mini boss and it's a high fortified key, they're really not that bad. You really just need to make sure that you're interrupting the fire one as much as you can, especially the cauterize, so that she doesn't heal. And then basically the wind guy can kind of just be ignored and cleaved off of until the fire one's dead. The fire one will also cast a stun on somebody that you need to dispel right away, because immediately after she casts that stun, she puts like a big fire circle on the ground, and she always aims it at whoever she put the stun on. So that's the molten subduction. That would be the stun, and then the magma crash is what you would do to get rid of it. Okay, fire one goes down, and then you just have a Squallbringer Cyraz left, who really is such a joke. Like I was actually expecting more. I thought these guys were going to be really tough when I did this on Mythic 0 way back in December when the expansion came out. But really, they're not that bad. That being said, the fire one can be hard if you don't have a lot of interrupts, so just keep that in mind. If you don't have a paladin, it might be good to set an interrupt rotation with your group so that you can catch all of them, or at least, the majority of them. Okay, now going into the frog boss. So this guy really not tough on Fortified, in my opinion. It helps if you're ready for his abilities. So you may have noticed I don't really use boss timers, but I have a general sense of when he's going to cast what he does. So on tyrannical weeks, you're going to want to set yourself up for his abilities so that you're not scrambling at the last second. For Fortified, you have a little bit more room to just sort of heal reactively rather than proactively. But anyways, Nature Swiftness, Primordial Wave mixed in with Chain Heals is perfect for most of his abilities. The two damaging abilities he does are both AoE. The Overpowering Croak has 3 ticks, and they're pretty large. And then the Toxic Effluvia, I hope I'm saying that right. Yeah, it's happening right now. I believe that one is also 3 ticks, but it does a little bit less damage than the Overpowering Croak, I find. The thing about the toxic one, though, that can be a bit tricky, though, is he usually casts it while the frogs are out, meaning that you may be running away or maybe getting wailed on by those frogs while that's happening, so just be aware of Great thing about this boss, so the frogs, he will actually eat them. So when he has his green circle on him, that means he's going to consume whatever's standing in there. That is a great opportunity to lure the ads in there. So you'll see I actually use my stun totem as well as my earthbind, the slow totem, once the ads are around the boss, in order to sort of keep them there, so that when he does his consume ability, he just eats those frogs right up and you don't have to worry about them. Other than that, you also have the belly slam. He actually looks at whoever he's going to target with it. So if he looks at you and gives you that evil eye that he's about to jump over, start moving right away, because if you do wait until the last second to move, especially if you're not handy at pressing Ghost Wolf immediately, it'll probably catch you, because it does happen quite fast. All right, now we have more frogs coming out. So I could have played this a little bit better. I should have lured them towards the boss maybe a bit quicker. That being said, it did work out though, because he did eat them all. So just be aware of where you're standing relative to the boss and where the frogs that are chasing you are. Ideally, you want the frog boss to be in between you and the small guys. Okay, so that was a little bit dangerous there. I had Entangling happen while he targeted me with the belly slam. Once again, Ghost Wolf, amazing. It's great. You will notice though, sometimes the Ghost Wolf, even with Thunderous Paws activated, talented into, it doesn't get rid of the Entangling right away. And that's because that ability can only occur every 20 seconds. So if you use Ghost Wolf for any reason before Entangling or whatever other ability you're trying to use Thunderous Paws for, it will not work. So just try and keep that in mind. Okay, so with a priest, you can actually soothe all of these mobs and get past them. We were actually planning to skip this entire hallway, but I believe the tank accidentally pulls one of the packs a bit further up, which is fine. Once again, totally fine. If anything, I think we were good on count anyways, but if anything, it just made us, extra good on count. For whatever reason though, if you can't skip these dragons, they do hurt a lot. Like a lot. So if you have a priest in your group, it's awesome because they can mass dispel the chill that they do. If you don't, however, this is a perfect opportunity once again to use the cooldowns that you have. Do not sit on your cooldowns for this hallway if you're doing the dragons. You will need to heal them. The dot ticks for a lot, and you only have one dispel. So hopefully between you and the group, you can at least dispel a few of them, and then you're left with only healing 1 or 2 people. However, that is going to depend on your group comp. This is another situation where, like I mentioned at the beginning, Thunderous Paws is a great option. So if you're using Thunderous Paws and your cognition of not using it for anything before the chill goes out for at least 20 seconds, you can immediately Ghost Wolf to get rid of the chill, and then you can dispel somebody else. So that is at least 2 debuffs gone right away. And then you can just heal whoever's left with the debuffs, which shouldn't be too hard with only a few of them. But once again, having a Shadow Priest in this dungeon is what I recommend, not only for this portion, but the first boss as well. It just makes it a little bit easier, especially on the Tyrannical from the overwhelming power dot that he puts on everybody. And also, priests are just great in general. They have, the fort buff. They do good damage. They're really good utility this season. So I don't know about you guys, but I have definitely seen a lot of them. Hey, you'll notice that was actually the first death of the dungeon, and it is because he was standing in that thunder thing that goes on the ground that the Gale Callers do. And the reason he was standing there is because he's using the boon trinket, and so he was unable to move. And actually, you'll see in the chat there, he says, can't wait to drop this trinket. And that's because it's really annoying when you use it and stuff like that happens. So, but no harm, no foul. We were all good here. We were able to kill this pull even without the extra DPS. And also, realistically, for me as a healer, I'm kind of like, thank God right now, because it gives me a second to sit here and drink before what is probably one of the most terrifying bosses this season, while somebody else reses the DPS. So, although one of the most terrifying in my opinions, probably one of the most fun as well as a healer. Like if you ever just wanted a simulator of like rot damage to see how much HPS you can pump out, this is it. Okay, so pulling this boss immediately, it's going to start trucking everybody down. And keep in mind, this is only a fortified, so on Tyrannical, this is like insane damage. There's only a few mechanics for this boss that you have to worry about. One of them being that Frost Cyclone. So you always want to make sure before that ability goes out, you are not standing near any of these solid ice blocks. Solid ice blocks being the ones that are not cracked, and you can hide behind those for the hailstorm. If you happen to hide behind a cracked one, it will explode on you and you will die, so just be careful of that. Something to note is that the first ice block beside her, the one that we just hid behind, is always going to be a full ice block at the beginning of the fight, and so you can always hide behind that one. There's no RNG there. You can always pick that one to hide behind first, unless someone gets rid of it with the Frost Cyclone. Okay, so now that we've gone through the abilities, I'll just let you in on the secret to healing this boss. It's really just using everything you possibly have in your arsenal, but sort of spacing it out so that you don't get caught with nothing. And it's also being efficient with the heals that you have. Because if you're not efficient, then you will run out of mana, especially on a tyrannical week. So some of the ways I'm being efficient are I'm trying to cast Chain Heal mostly when I only have High Tide. However, you will see me cast it when I don't, just as a filler spell. I'm also using a great weak aura that I'm going to go into more detail about in one of my future videos. It's a weak aura that Spectre Shock in the Resto Shaman Discord has made. And honestly, it's game changing. It's amazing. It's probably one of the best things that I think I've encountered this season. It really makes, it gives you an extra tool to play with Primordial Wave. So you'll see it next to my frames. It's the healing wave icon there. And basically it counts how many healing waves that you have until you're about to get your undulation proc. And the reason that you count that is undulation works different with your primordial wave, healing wave cleaves. And hopefully you're at least a little bit well versed with the spec, otherwise you may not know what I'm talking about. That being said, stay tuned for the talent build that I have coming out soon, hopefully within a week or so, that I will go into much more detail about that. But basically you get your counter to 2, rip your primordial wave, and then when you actually cast healing wave, it gives an undulation buffed healing wave on all of the players who have Riptide, which is huge. It basically almost doubles the healing of your primordial wave cleaves, which is amazing. And if you use it while you have Cloudburst Totem down, it juices up the Cloudburst. Like it's such a game-changing weak aura in my opinion. So big kudos to Spectre Shock. I will 100% be mentioning her again when I do make the talent video as well. But yeah, anyways, this boss, all about using what's in your arsenal. Make sure you have mana pots, make sure you have healing pots, make sure you're ripping your personal defensive on cooldown. And you will get through that. And also it does help to mention before pulling the boss, whatever group you're in, tell your group also, be using your personal defenses on cooldown, don't save them. Use health pots when you need to. Anything that they can do to help you, A, not run out of mana, and B, keep everyone alive is a bonus for that fight because it's so intense. But once again, that being said, I think it's one of the best fights this season. It's so much fun as a healer, and it's very stressful, which I love. All right, going into the Gauntlet. The Gauntlet, I feel like it seems a lot scarier than it actually is. They've actually nerfed it quite a bit than the original version that was in Mythic Zero way back when the expansion came out. So really, it's all about interrupting what you can interrupt and just following your tank, dodging these water waves that come up in both directions, and just DPSing whatever you can. Really, the tough part is with the dragon and then with the mini boss. So once again, because we have a Shadow Priest, the dragon is less threatening, than it would be without a Shadow Priest. But even still, it will do a lot of damage, so just be careful of that. Also, if anyone dies here, if you don't have a battle res, it really sucks because it's such a long run back. And if you did not go right at the beginning and get the skip, it's like there's no point in releasing here. So if anybody dies, hopefully you have a battle res. If not, if you don't have a battle res, there are lulls within the fights where you do have moments to res, like right there. Once we finish that pack, the tank could have run up to start the next build while start the next pull while I res the guy. But we had a battle res, so all good. There are multiple ways to tank this dragon, actually. I've seen some tanks do it where they actually face the dragon the other way, so it would be facing towards us, and then we stand where the tank is standing, and then you actually don't have to move for the waves, because they don't, they basically get LOS from that pillar if you're standing right up against it. However, this time the tank is actually using it, so they don't have to move, so it's really either or. It's either the DPS uses it so they don't have to move, or the tank uses it. Also, just a quick tip I've found now doing this dungeon a bunch of times, try to angle your camera so that you can look ahead and see the direction that the waves are coming, and move early. Don't wait till the last second. Don't get caught in a situation where you don't see it until the last second. Just be preemptive, and it's no big deal. It's such an easy mechanic to handle once you get the hang of it. All right, so we have one more pack for the mini boss. This whole gauntlet, once again, I don't think it's that bad. It's pretty easy, aside from the dragon and the mini boss. So these small pulls, it's basically just get as much damage as you can, get your stuns, get your interrupts. That'll make things a lot easier. And then it's basically a game of patience. It's just waiting for your DPS and yourself to slowly whittle everything down. Eventually everything dies and you move on. You just have to, make sure that you're not getting hit by those waves. And finally, this mini boss. So I highly, highly recommend if you're running this key on a higher fortified, like if you have a higher fortified key for this dungeon, lust on this mini boss, because the damage it does is insane. Like this is going to be crazier on higher keys. I don't know how you're supposed to survive this on like a 24 or a 25 without it just one-shotting everybody and having to use a cooldown for every single cast that she does. But because she does cast the Inundate pretty frequently, if they're going to nerf anything about this mini boss, I feel like it will be the frequency at which she casts that. So she usually casts the Inundate, which does a lot of damage to everybody, and then she'll do one other ability in between, usually the blue circle on the ground that you have to move out of, or the aqueous barrier, which puts a barrier on her, which you can interrupt. So basically, Inundate, ability, Inundate, rinse and repeat. So as long as you can heal everybody to full health in between the Inundates, you should be good. This is a great spot to be using really any cooldown you have, whether it's Slink, Healing Tide, Ancestral Guidance, Ascendance. You can use everything in your toolkit here to get through this boss, because you're realistically not going to need it for the last boss. The last boss does not hit that hard. It's not very scary. Once again, that might change once you get really, really high, or if you're running it on Tyrannical. But on this 22 Fortified, the last boss is actually pretty nice and cozy. That being said, you do need to do the last boss properly, otherwise it will get lots of stacks, but we'll explain that as we get there. All right, once everything's dead, you're just going to mop up the last few Aqua Ragers that spawn up. Let your tank know if you need mana. We actually have 7 minutes going into this boss, which is great. This actually can be a really long fight depending on how many phases you get of the where he submerges and you get thrown back and you have to run through. So on Tyrannical, I could actually see this being up to like a 7-minute fight, but Fortified, you're probably looking at around 4 minutes on a higher key, maybe 5, depending on how quickly you do it, especially if you don't have Lust, which we don't. Okay, so this boss, really the only ability that you have to worry about while he's up is the Tempest Fury, which does a big AoE damage on everybody. But between, like, he doesn't do anything immediately after that, so you have so much time between those casts to heal everybody up. Otherwise, he puts these globules on the ground. My advice for these is move far away from them. As soon as you see them spawn, Ghost Wolf, get the hell out and stand far away, because they do move around a little bit erratically. It's almost like they chase you if you're standing near them, and they can catch you off guard or, interrupt what could be a crucial cast to keep somebody alive. So move as far away from them as you can so that you don't have to worry about them. You can also bait them as well. So if you guys stack up before the globules come out, you can bait them in one spot and then everybody can move over. But once again, not necessarily necessary on a Fortified week. And this is only a Pug 2. We're not communicating or anything. So, but something to consider if you are in a group Discord or, doing a higher Tyrannical key. Okay, this part is easy. It just looks hard. So what you want to do is pop your Windrush, because usually you'll have it for every phase here. And then you just, once again, you angle your camera so you can see far ahead of you, and you run back and forth. Patience is the name of the game here. If you have globules in the way that you can't move past, just sit back, wait for them to explode, and then go. The worst thing you can do for that part of the fight is to try and rush yourself, because you will make a mistake. It's more likely you'll make a mistake, and then you'll die, or something will happen, and it's kind of embarrassing. So try not to let that happen. This fight is actually one of the perfect opportunities to take Hex, which we actually don't get to take a lot anymore. Although that being said, with the Incorporeal affix, I'm sure we will take it a lot more. But anyways, Hex in this boss is great. So the way these adds work is the longer that they're left to channel, the more damage the boss will do. He basically gets like a stacking debuff for every second an add is allowed to channel. We actually got 18 stacks there, which is not great. You normally want to have around like 10 max. So he's going to do a lot more damage here. But Hex is great because it allows you to hard CC one of the adds while you deal with the rest. The Inundate that the adds cast does a lot of damage, so you don't want to be fighting all 4 adds at once unless you have like some really good coordinated stops for the Inundate cast. Because if like 3 of them go off at the same time, even if 2 of them go off at the exact same time, it will probably kill some people. So the hard CC with Hex is great for it. Lots of classes have things like Rogues have Blind. I think they have something else as well. Demon Hunters have Imprison. Monks have Paralyze. Like there's a lot that you can do with those adds. Ideally, what I'm finding the strat is you CC2 and then you kill 2. However, once you get to really high keys, especially on Tyrannical, it will probably be better to interrupt all 4 of them group them up and kill them as fast as you can in order to make the timer. But that would that would require, once again, some pretty coordinated stops in order to ensure that none of the casts get off. All right, last time we have to do this. So once again, I angle my camera so that I can see. I wait for the globules when I have to wait for them, and otherwise you just run through. There you go, easy peasy. Okay, so once I get here, I think I hex that ad. This time the Demon Hunter imprisoned it because I believe the tank asked him to. And you'll see we only get like 13 stacks here, which is great. Oh, I apologize. That was actually really silly of me. I did not take hex for this dungeon because we discussed beforehand who was going to be CCing, because we had the Demon Hunter and the Rogue as well. So sorry, don't disregard any of what I just said. It's all valid. Just note that I did not take hex, which is why you don't see me hexing anything. But if you are one of the only people in your group with a hard CC, I definitely recommend hex for this boss. All right, and now we have our last 20%, which once again, pretty smooth. One thing about this boss that I didn't mention that you really shouldn't have to worry about if your tank has control about it. Every so often they'll do like a 1-2 punch combo on the tank where they knock him back, and then they do a channeled AoE ability, or sorry, a channeled ability on the tank that really hurts them. But as long as they have some mitigation ability up for it, you probably won't even notice it, especially if you're running with a pally tank. So don't worry about that too much. And there you go. That was a nice, very clean Halls of Infusion 22. I believe at the time that this was completed, it was, I don't think it was like top 300. I think it was like 312, which is pretty cool for me personally. I'm excited that we were able to down this. I had actually tried a 22 halls at least twice earlier in the week, and both of them we wiped at separate points. And like I said, once you have one wipe here on this level of a key, this long of a key, it's pretty much game over. So to be able to time this was great. And as you saw, nothing super hard. Like, yeah, it was a lot of stuff that needed to be done correctly by, you know, both the tank, the DPS, and the healer. But it was really just about staying clean, knowing what to stop, when to stop it with all of the fortified trash. You know, doing the bosses cleanly, it's all possible for you to do. And you'll notice I did it without the use of a lot of add-ons or, you know, boss timers or anything like that. So this is 100% doable for you. And I really hope that this video helps you out, and that, you know, next Fortified week or even this week with Tyrannical, you can go in here with a little bit more confidence using some of the strategies that we've laid out here. So with all of that being said, thank you for watching my videos. I always appreciate it. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you next time with another dungeon video.